Thanks for joining. Listen to a little smooth jazz in the background, you know. A little smooth jazz fused with a little hip hop. Setting the mood for a nice little morning conversation on this Freestyle Friday. I'd love to have a conversation about the national education crisis. About 10 years ago, well, really my entire career working in education the last 15 years or so. But within the last 10 years, I began doing some presentations around the national education crisis, centered around a lot of Michael Holzman's research, Dr. Michael Holzman's research, written a wide variety of books, particularly about the impact of the education system upon Black and brown students. And so I began compiling statistics about the national education crisis, about national school pushout, about what was happening disproportionately to Black students in white school systems, essentially, even in schools that had been disenfranchised from financial support, meaning that they were Black urban schools, and they didn't necessarily have the tax support, right? The financial support to have a successful, supported, financially funded school system. Even those schools in those areas, good morning, my brother, even those areas, even those schools still suffered from the same types of systemic academic failures, right? So today, this morning, I really wanted to pick this conversation back up about education. If you recall, Wednesday, about 2 Wednesdays ago, I had a conversation reading from the compilation of the textbook on Black Children's School Life Matters, right? It's a matter of life or death is the title of the book. Today, I want to introduce you to the book called The Mind of Boys, right? The Mind of Boys, and it's really an interesting look from a white academia, a white scholar, a white academic professor, former teacher, superintendent, principal, etc. Him and his wife both work in trauma and etc. And the reason I want to pinpoint this book in contrast to the urban teaching, right? One of the most important books that I've always loved by Lois Winger, right? A very important book, right? This is a very interesting book, The Urban Teacher. I want to contrast the two as I have to pivot this conversation about the national education crisis, particularly during COVID right now. You are well aware that Black students were underperforming, as they call it, underperforming nationally. Across the country, this has been a national education crisis for quite some time. Ever since, you recall the history of America, Blacks were not allowed to even read, right? So there was a historic intent to keep Blacks from accessing education, right? And we understood when technology and began to evolve, and industries began to evolve, people needed education to keep up with technology and actually to participate in the spread and the technology and in the labor force. Well, because we lacked education in those areas, weren't allowed to get to education in those areas, we have historically been barred from accessing equitable education. And so here we are now, decades later, past Jim Crow, past civil rights, into the 80s, into mass incarceration, into other systemic designs to keep Blacks from succeeding academically. There's always been systems to do so. So my conversation today I want to pivot the conversation around the fact that there's been a national education crisis before COVID. Now that COVID is here, and systems have always traditionally failed to provide resources, right? And we as a community have not had the foundation essential enough to sustain our own self-support, right? We've been subjected as so-called second-class so-called citizens, right? Because we've been subjugated to that, and systems have kept us in those conditions and positions, we've never really been able to really rise up. Even though opportunity is always there, we've never have risen up and actually fought for real independence to provide for self, to build an economic infrastructure for self, to build a social infrastructure for self, to build an industrial infrastructure for self, right? A manufacturing infrastructure, right? A civic infrastructure. We've never done that because we've always been told that we've had to assimilate, that assimilation is the right thing to do in America, that segregation is bad, even though the white systems have always kept segregation intact through their systems. We're still segregated by neighborhoods. We're still segregated at work. We're still segregated civically. We're still segregated socially. We're still segregated by our social systems, right? American democracy is a segregated system. It just is. It's based on categorizations, classes, et cetera, right? So we've never really had the freedom, I would say, to be independent, to do for self. And because we're in that predicament, we still are interacting with their systems and still relying on their systems and still have to use the education system, the public education system, because we failed. And we have to take accountability for ourselves because we failed to rise up, to really do for self, because we haven't broken from a lot of those mental shackles that says that we can't do that. That everything that the systems have already created has been laid out for us, and we need to just follow suit. We need to just comply, right? And so it makes it difficult for us to pivot a conversation about the previous national crisis that always impacted us, because a lot of us have yet to admit that the system has failed us, that our education systems have failed us, even our local education systems. We are too afraid to even admit that because we're too afraid to challenge white systems and white institutions and white power structures, right? We're too afraid of that. Many of us have jobs within the education system or in other social systems that are white institutions, white ran, and are essentially entrenched in racism and bias, cultural bias, and environmental biasness within the workforce. And you know that you can't go out and attack white institutions and white systems without getting fired at your job over here, because they'll consider you a troublemaker, right? So we've been unfortunately stuck in that matrix of mindset to where we refuse to speak up against systems, right? And so right now, you know, it's critical for us to have this conversation because our children are going to suffer the most, because our children have never been fully supported under previous systems, right? Before COVID, never fully been supported. Equity has never really been given to our students. Consideration has never really been given. We haven't been included in the curriculum, in the upper management, in the design, right? In the management. We have never truly been included equitably, right? And considered to such an extent that, let me tell you this, your most struggling population in every society, whether it be struggling economically, struggling educationally, struggling socially, mentally, physically healthy, whatever population in any given society is the most vulnerable, that society must shift its resources, its concern, its priorities to the most vulnerable. Because that most vulnerable, if it's allowed, right, to continue to perpetuate, to continue to grow, to continue to fester, it harms the rest of the ecosystem. And that's what's been so telling about society in America, is that it's been willing to suffer. Internally, America has been willing to suffer the pain and scourge of racism, of its racist policies and practices to maintain its privilege. It's been willing to suffer that so that it could allow its most vulnerable citizens to suffer, because the heart, the concern, the genuine care and consideration just isn't there. That's why we're always the last, the bottom of the barrel in every statistical category, right? So we were failing before COVID. Our children weren't testing proficiently all across the country before COVID. Now COVID has come, schools have shut down, schools have gone partial virtual, partial on-site, etc., back and forth. You know, everyone across the board, you know, has already said that this is going to have a devastating effect on children's development, on children's upbringing, on children's socialization, on children's educational success, achievements, right? We're losing a lot of children right now. We were previously losing children a lot before. That's why this conversation is important for us right now. That's why it's important for me to have this conversation. And pivot that conversation, as I talk about it on a broad national scale, to pivot that conversation about right here locally, because we have to be concerned, to be aware enough about what's happening to our local education systems, about how our children are being served or aren't being served. We have to become aware. So this particular book I'm going to reference first It's from Dr. Michael Gurian, him and his wife, Dr. Kathy Stevens, and they're both clinical psychologists and educators and etc. And The Mind of Boys has an interesting chapter I want to read. And so we're going to do a little reading, and I don't want to spend too much time because I know I can go on and kick it. But the question is about the crisis that we're in, right? And this book was written, 10, 12 years ago. The crisis that we're in, right? Are we really in a crisis, first and foremost, specifically when it comes to black boys and black girls? Rest in peace to all the young girls that's been murdered, especially recently here in Jackson. So we got to have that conversation. Is there a crisis? Let's define a crisis, and let's look at it from another lens real quick, right? So he says, and this is in the very beginning stages of the book, he says, is there really a crisis? Because the word crisis gets thrown around a great deal these days, it deserves to be treated with suspicion. In fact, Kathy, meaning his wife, and I have tried not to use it, thinking, and they quote, but so many boys are getting by just fine. Can we really call this situation a crisis, unquote? And then he says, we've said, quote, yes, the Gurian and Stevens families endured, struggled, and overcame their problems, but is it really a national, international crisis, unquote? He says, we look back on the months after Columbine, during the Gurian Institute staff, along with many professionals who were asked by the media to comment and to offer our analysis of what happened and why. We learned then how using the word crisis can generate unwarranted fear about children's lives, a sensationalism that can wound schools and families, that can spread hopelessness and hinder necessary changes and healing, right? So when I talk about a crisis, I understand that because it makes people fearful that what we're talking about is so severe, so serious, and perhaps people are in trouble because this is a crisis and somebody must be held accountable, that people try to run from the reality of that crisis. And because of that, we've gone too far and overlooked some real serious impending crisis. So let's read this next paragraph. He says, yet, after all of this, we have ended up using the term crisis. Yes, we're sorry to say there really is a crisis. And in this chapter, we hope to convince you to use the word not just as a negative alarm, but rather as an inspiration for positive change. Here are some of the things parents and educators are saying about the situation boys face in education today. Then he begins to read these various scenarios from these surveys that he took, right? Lori Hoff, a mother of 3 from Neenah, Wisconsin, wrote us, I have a 13-year-old boy. The middle school he attends is what I can only call anti-boy. The assignments, the discipline, the structure of the day make him flounder in a system that works against him. This is a parent. Another parent, Nettie Kruskin, a professional from Marion, Kentucky, wrote, I'm a developmental interventionist, assessing and working on developmental delays. I'm noticing that the majority of the children on my client list are boys. Now we get into some other deep stuff. Linda Sullivan, a mother of 2 from Virginia, wrote, I am becoming increasingly alarmed at the amount of boys being told they have processing problems, ADHD, LD, adjustment disorder, anxiety, and focus problems. By chance, I happened to uncover today a new parochial school in our area in which 8 out of 20 in a 3rd grade class are on Ritalin. Now, we could pivot this conversation to some of the things that Dr. Umar, for example, talks about, right? In assessing why are so many of our boys diagnosed with learning disabilities, right? ADHD. And as I mentioned, we've been dealing with a system that has failed to adequately consider us, right? And this is a systemic national system, right? And it's been taught and passed down through university courses about, from the academic point of view, academic system that trains and preps and prepares teachers to enter into this atmosphere, into this environment, the academic environment, right? So there's a lot of places and sources of this issue and problem, right? But we have to pivot the conversation about what are we as a black community, a brown community, previous to COVID, now post-COVID and in COVID, how are we going to approach this situation to make sure that our children aren't further swept into a system that has already failed them, that has already allowed decades and decades of children, particularly black children, to be pipelined to prison? Not that the school has pipelined them themselves, right? But you have to understand the process involved with the adolescent's development, children's development. That as we socialize them in our home, our families, the first place in which they're taught by our mothers and our fathers in that family institution, that's the first place, right? Then that first home life, don't forget that home life is impacted by society, by communities, right? And those children are still, though, that family structure is impacted by that community, that neighborhood, and then that child is sent off into that educational environment as a safety net, right? There's a safety net there. There's a trust factor that the education institution is responsible for imparting academic and learning instruction to this child as it grows through its adolescence and becomes an adult, that education system, in partnership with families, with parents, etc., in partnership with communities, prepares and preps that child to go off into the adult world. That's the ideal system. But because that's the ideal system, we still have to judge it according to that, because that's what we must hold them accountable to deliver. We must hold them accountable to deliver that. And when there's failures in that system, we must begin to punch those holes or fill those holes up, right? We must do that, and we must work in tandem and collectivity to bring about that process. We know, because of institutional racism, cultural biases, and etc., that we have been failed. The black and brown communities have been failed. Universally acknowledged. And if anyone challenges that, we know that they must be hiding the truth, right? Fearful of admitting reality. Or maybe they're just that blind. So the question is, what are we going to do moving into the future to protect our children? One of the things, and I had this other book I wanted to mention, Urban Teaching, one of the things we have to focus on is this. We can't continuously rely on systems, right? We can't continuously rely on systems. We have to begin to participate in the building blocks of systems that are failing. We have to create systems, but not, we have to create the institutions in which them systems have failed us. We have to fill in that gap and build those institutions, or build the programmatic structures for which those systems are failing us. So that means that we have to develop our own home-based education systems. That means that we have to set aside time and curriculum to work with our children, right, in our homes. That we need to make sure that we are still feeding them and keeping them on structured, rigorous courses of curriculum and academics in life. We have to do that at home. That's our responsibility too, right? Because the systems right now, particularly during COVID, right, are only going to be perpetuated. The failures that have been inflicted upon us are only going to be perpetuated even further, or exacerbated, I should say. So in this book, Urban Teaching, which is an interesting book by Lois Weiner, there's a chapter in here, chapter 2, what's different about teaching in urban schools. And one of the realizations that she reached, and I don't want to read too much of it, one of the realizations she reached is that when she first got into New York schools and started teaching in New York public schools, she initially saw herself as a failure, and was traumatized by what she was seeing and experienced, the level of dysfunction of family homes, right? The behavioral problems that she was witnessing in schools, the lack of cohesion between students and interacting with the education system. There's a lack of cohesion. There's a distrust, right? There's a resentment, right? There's a lot of things that's going on between children in the school system that she got a chance to witness as an educator, that she was thrown back by and wasn't prepared. But what she began to quickly realize in this book about urban teaching is phenomenal. What she began to realize is that it wasn't about the type of students that were in the schools. It wasn't about the neighborhoods, right, that the children came from that were in the schools. This is what she said. This is what she's delving off into. It wasn't really about that. What it really boiled down to was who was employed in those schools to work with these kids. Because you're supposed to meet the children where they are. So if you find a child in Alaska or New York or Detroit or Jackson, you as an education provider need to be prepared and equipped to send somebody to that child where they are at in that school system, not to their front door, so to speak, but in that school system. It is your responsibility as an education system, as an education provider, to meet that child where they're at, all of the children in your district. That's what we've been failing to do. We've just been simply looking for people that meet the qualifications of an educator. They went to school and they got their degrees and they qualified by resume. See, that's one of the most fundamental errors that the education system makes, but pivoting that to us is one of the fundamental mistakes we make, because we have to make better decisions and choices about where we send our children to school, about how we educate our children, about how involved we're going to be in their education. Too often, I think that we overly rely on the education system and we place everything in their hands, and we then chide our children, hold them accountable for their failures. Well, why aren't you getting A's? Well, they say that you ain't paying attention in school, right? That's the wrong approach. Don't interrogate your child like that when they say what your child done did. When they say it, right? The system, right? Instead, go find out what the system talking about. Go hear them out, hear your child out, and you decipher what's going on, right? Investigate properly. Don't just immediately question your child and check your child because the system said something about your child, right? Because a lot of these people that work in the systems, guess what? They're average people. Average people lie a lot. A lot of these average people that work in our school systems, right here, locally, nationally, all across the country, they lie all the time. Police officers lie all the time. Judges lie all the time. Prosecutors lie all the time. People lie all the time. It's a systemic, mental health, social health, whatever problem, however you want to describe lying, being deceitful, but people do it. Integrity is low in society, in the world. We know that. Why do you think that we are a society supposed to be founded upon faith and religion? The Judeo-Christian Islamic faith societies, right? We're supposed to be rooted in moral integrity, spirituality. But we seem to be the first people to dispense injustice in society. The first people quick to punish and not to forgive. The people not to seek restoring justice, but quick to distribute inequitable justice. This is the way of the American life. Right? This is understood. So, what are some of the solutions? Some of the solutions to this crisis that we're facing is, for one, we need to arm ourselves and understand the crisis that we're facing. We need to understand the statistical data about what's happening to our children within the education system. We need to understand that standardized testing is an assault on black children. It's an assault on the black education. It's an assault on our opportunity to access to equitable education. Standardized testing. It's well known, it's been criticized by academic scholars across the board. But we still want to use it because we understand what standardized testing does. If standardized testing allows us to discriminate and to use biased curriculum, you see, to test children, right? We talk about common sense. I want to give a great example when we talk about common sense. All sense isn't common to everybody. You have to understand that, remember, black people were prevented from reading. We were prevented from being allowed to even rationalize, to be able to reason. We were prevented of that systematically, historically. You understand that? So when we talk about common sense, we had to develop an understanding of what you people were doing to us, what the systems were doing to us. We had to step outside that and be courageous and bold in order to start really thinking and evaluating what y'all was really doing when we broke free, right? So we developed our own sense of camaraderie and understanding and culture among us. And some things that are common to us just ain't common to you. And a lot of stuff that are common to you isn't common to us. Some things that you do don't make sense to us. Some things that we do don't make sense to you. So don't ever try to put us in the lens, in that narrow lens of what's common sense to you nationally or generally isn't necessarily common sense to us. You need to understand that black people stop buying into that. Let me give you a great example. I was in a meeting one time. Recognized African-American leaders in our community was also there. One in particular said that a young black man who refused to roll down his window to give the police his driver's license, instead preferred to use his back window because he felt more safe. And this young brother got arrested, charged, all kind of things happened to this brother. Well, this black leader said the brother defied common sense, that basically telling me that, come on now, brother, you should use common sense. Because it should have been common sense to him that brother should have felt safe. You know what I'm saying? If you were speeding, you didn't do nothing wrong, just get the police your stuff and get your ticket and go on about your business. That proved to me and showed to me that me and that particular brother just really wasn't from the same neighborhood, from the same community. Because what was common to him and what he assumed and described that we should be common to us wasn't common to us. I'm going to give you a great example. This very same individual I witnessed flying past me on the highway, doing about 90. I didn't know it was him, actually. And right behind him followed him the police. As I got closer, eventually pulled him over. As the state trooper or sheriff was getting out of his vehicle, this same brother that told me about common sense, that brother should have rolled his window down and should have had the common sense enough to get him his stuff, etc., etc., that brother attempted to get out of his vehicle while the sheriff was getting out of his vehicle. Like he was going to approach the sheriff. That sheriff immediately grabbed his firearm and pointed to him and said, "Get back in your car." And guess what? That brother, that Negro, realized, "Get back in your place, Negro." And he got right back in that car quickly while the officer had his hand on his gun. You understand? Because that brother has a different relationship with the white community. His perspective is shaped by the white community. You don't understand that, though. And our community don't understand that about certain black people because we assume that because they're black, they have a professional career and they've made it professionally, that we ascribe to them representation and leadership of the black community. And that's how this particular individual is considered in our community. There's many like him. And it's sad because it's fundamental failures of perspective like that has us fighting within our own community, for freedom that we shouldn't have to be fighting for, that we shouldn't have to be negotiating for, I should say, right? We shouldn't have to be negotiating an equitable opportunity to get an education in a society that we now pay taxes on. We pay taxes, right? We fund the school system. So that means that we demand our fair share of that. You see what I mean? So when people try to tell us that, as if we don't really have no real claim or right to things in society that we pay taxes into. Every time we purchase anything, we help and maintain the social fabric of this society. We help pay for these roads. You understand? We pay for that. We pay for our schools. We pay the salaries of superintendents. We pay the salaries of our elected civic leaders, our county commissioners, our we pay their salaries. Therefore, we as black people, a minority, a majority, whatever our case may be, we demand and we should be demanding that the portion that we pay, we represent it for. Period. So that's what I'm talking about. And that's why at this stage, when we talk about solutions, we have to take our education back into our own hands. Not only do we have to take our education back into our own hands, but if we are still going to interact with the public school systems and send our school to the public school system, then we better be in full command of making sure that we are being equitably represented and that our students are being equitably represented and treated fairly in all of our school systems. Just because black people work for school systems don't mean that those black people got power to act and do fair, equitable justice, because they work for a system that got them in handcuffs. got a job and a family to go home to provide for. We've been harmed by these systems and made to clean up behind these systems and be a second-class citizen to these systems and accept our positions, mediocre positions, because it's paying our bills and it's taking care of our family. For far too long, we've accepted that. What I'm saying is, particularly right now, given the current crisis in the world, we got to step up, and now is the time to step up more than anything, right? Because our children's education is at stake. Our children's future is at stake. You young mothers out there right now that are having children right now, it is your children that are going to be inheriting these next systems in the next 10 years, right? So therefore, you got to be the ones to speak up. You got to be the ones to be prepared to be informed about what's happening downtown locally, about what's happening in your school system, right? About what's happening in your county system, right? About what's happening in your nonprofit organizations at their boards. We got to become more aware, because this is the way we seize power back. And I'm not saying seize power to take power from anybody. I'm saying the power that we've been deprived from, the access and opportunity we've been deprived from, the things that have been hurting us, the barriers that have been blocking us, we have the opportunity to remove them, and it only requires us to move our feet, to move our voices, to get involved, right? We're going to have to do that. We're going to have to. Now is the time. There's no better time than now. I cannot stress that more. Any of the young people that was working with me when I was working in the schools within the last 15 years, you young people, some of you are grown now, most of you are grown now. Now is the time for you to step up. And think about all the failures that was happening to you in school, which brought me to your school. The reason I was there. Think about why I was there. I shouldn't have had to been there. The systems, our social systems, our education system should have provided something, a stronger structure for you, so that a person like me that come from the penitentiary, that slipped through the cracks before, wouldn't have had to come back from the penitentiary to come back with a message to y'all. I shouldn't have had to go be there. So now that says that you got to come back and be the one to take my place. You see what I'm saying? So that we don't have people like me that slip through the cracks. They have to come back. But instead, it's people who stay within them, maintain ground, solid ground, even while the cracks is there. That way it gives you a chance to come right back and fill the cracks before they get deep. See, when I came back, the cracks were so deep that I had to jump inside the crevices with you. For years, I was in the crevices with you, traveling all over the state of Michigan at my own expense. Nobody paid me a dime or a dollar to travel to schools to speak, to juvenile centers to speak. I had to get down and dirty with you, right? So I can get some of y'all up to the top. The see, dang, the cement is up here, not down here. The level ground is up here, not down there. So many of you have risen up. I see so many of y'all, and I salute y'all, because when y'all see me in public, y'all holler at me. Hakeem, what's up? You remember me? You should come to my school. Now I'm calling on y'all to come back, to go back to your school, to go back to the young generation, your little cousins, your little nephews and nieces, your little sisters. We got to go back and get them, because it's a national education crisis. The national education crisis is infecting us. It's affecting us to such an extent that we are ill-prepared as adults. When we become adults, we are ill-prepared to raise and lead families and to lead our community. It's not just a matter of all we got to do right now is rise up and take back our community. We got to educate ourselves. We got to rescue ourselves from the education systems and from our own failure to really educate our own. We have failed to do so. We're not writing enough books. We're not creating enough curriculum. You know, why do you think I created curriculum? Because it was an absence of curriculum. Matter of fact, y'all already know. Y'all know what it is? What? Come on now. I got curriculum galore, grades 4 through 6. These are all my textbooks. Teaching in the schools. All textbooks. Y'all know what it is? This is why I did this. This is what we got to do. We got to give back. We got to create new avenues that our children ain't never seen to have before. Who do you think going to cover these books? These students. You think anybody before me ever came and put students on a book? Put their stories in print for the world to see and hear? You think our stories been told by anybody? Anybody been telling our stories? We got to take advantage of that. We got to take the reins of our future into our hands. Because they ain't going to do it. They ain't going to inspire our students to tell them that they're worthy enough to be featured on the cover of a book. Ain't nobody going to tell them that they worthy enough, you understand, to inspire the writing of a book. Logan Taylor inspired the writing of a book from a rap she wrote. You see what I'm saying? Nobody going to never tell them that you inspire the creation of stuff. The sister, Logan Taylor, inspired me to create a book that's an educational tool and resource for hundreds and thousands of kids to come after her. You see the power in our students when they're given opportunities, when the value of them is realized? You see what I'm saying? What? Anybody ever put our kids on the cover of no book and told you to teach other kids so that when I went to classrooms after this, students said, I know her, I know him, that's my cousin. So that means when these students, the seeds that I planted, when they walk in the classrooms where my books are at, they are inspired by students who went before them. Come on, y'all. I'm trying to tell y'all what we got to do. I ain't sitting in the penitentiary for 15 years learning and understanding these systems and how they impacted me and failed me to come out here for nothing. There's opportunities for us, but we got to get involved and we got to inspire each other, inspire the next generation. You see what I'm saying? We got to, because it's still a generation of dope dealers out here inspiring them. And I ain't blaming them, because I was once one of them. It was inspired by some before me. You understand? But it was conditions were created in America to create the kind of poverty and desolateness in the lives of black people that people had to resort to such actions as selling drugs in this nation in which the resources are boundless, which everyone should be living far above poverty levels. There should be no poverty in this country. That's the realness, man, and we ain't really willing to accept and stand on that and hold our politicians accountable to that, making sure the resources are equitably distributed. You see? So we got an opportunity, man. You know, so I just wanted to holler at y'all, read y'all a little bit from The Mind of Boys. It's a powerful book. There's so much inside. I got a lot of great books, you know, I've been reading for a long time. I love books. The Urban Teaching, Lois Weiner. It's a powerful book. You know, all my books online on Amazon. Just Google my name, Hakeem Crampton. This is a book I really recommend. Our School Life. It's a powerful book. You know, an anthology of student stories and lyrics about getting off the pipeline to prison, right? It's a powerful book of student stories, you know. I mean, and the beautiful thing about some of these stories is that we forget how hopeful our kids are. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share something with you real quick, too, just to put you up on something. Some of the kids in this book, some of these kids who had these great hopes and great dreams in this book, when I caught them in alternative school, in the 6th grade, when they were in the 7th grade, 5th grade, etc., these kids had hopes and dreams about where they wanted to be in life. And within a couple short years of this, some of these kids in this book got shot. Some of them shot people. You understand me? Some of them locked up right now. I just wrote this book in 2015, 6 years ago. Some of these kids got shot after this book. Some of these kids shot other kids after this book. Some of these kids is locked up right now after this book, after they had hopes and dreams. You see what I'm saying? After. And it's because, not because, you know, oh, so you failed in Hakeem, you went in there and you ain't do nothing, brothers. No, the type of work that I do and did, this has to go consistently, more than just one individual. I can't save every black child in Jackson. It can't happen. We need more black male mentors, more black female mentors, more teachers, more educators, more black social workers involved in the lives of our children, more parents involved, more parents being empowered to be involved in the school system. We need more of that, more of that. It can't just be one person. I can't do it all. Because for every one person I went to and talked to that went on and got their life together, another student went the other direction. I can't save them all. Nobody can. But it's going to take all of us. But I do want to share with you something. Listen to this. And this brother's story, let me find, I think it's Frank's story. I ain't gonna read my man's story. This story right here, yeah, Frank. See, listen to this. And this little Frank Anderson, a lot of y'all know who this little student is. Good student, man. He was a good kid, man. I love Frank. He said, my name is Frank Anderson, and I go to 4th Street Learning Center. but I keep trying to go back to Parkside. Meaning that he was trying to get out of alternative and make it back to the middle school. But it's hard when I don't listen to teachers and be disrespectful. But I am trying to get my grades up and not go to jail. All I got to do is listen to Hakeem. He can get me out the street. He said, I don't want to live like a bum. This is very dumb, but I'm not like that. I'm a good kid. But when people talk stuff to me, I listen and get off my focus and try to get them back. Right? This is a sixth grade. He was 12 years old, and he was already, through working with me, beginning to analyze his behavior and analyze the impacts of it. Right? Now, remember, mind you, he's 12 years old. He's a child. He's developing. He's growing. So he wrote a rap. And most of the students in my books here, they write raps and stories and lyrics about themselves and about life and about education, right? So in this particular story, he wrote this rap. He says, my rap. He says, it's a tragedy how these little kids are getting shot out their misery. It's seriously not funny, but when I was a little kid, I loved the Easter Bunny. You know it's hard to get money. When I get through school, I'm going to do the right thing. When I rap, I kind of sing, but it's all right because I do the right thing. You see that? The power and the vision of inspiring children. This is what we have to do. These are the solutions that we need to employ right now, post-COVID, during COVID, after already a failed education, national education system has failed to really adequately address our needs and concerns. We have to take more so direct involvement in the lives of our children, right? In their educational careers. We have to get more so involved to make sure there's more supports for our children, right? So, just wanted to have that conversation with y'all this morning. It was on my mind. There's some great programs out there. You already know Community Action Agency, Youth Build. You know, y'all can contact Cornell Sample at C-Sample at caajlh.org. He'll help y'all get straight and get connected to a skilled trades program in Jackson. There's other great youth programs out there. Get your young girls involved in Partial to Girls. They have a great event coming up, too. They have the 20 Girls Transparency Project, round 2 coming up, the Transparency Project. So it's going to be important for y'all to get y'all young ladies involved in programs like that where they can get the kind of support and love that's needed in our community to fill the gaps and avoid some of these other failures that's been out here for far too long. So with that, I salute y'all. You know what I'm saying? It's been good talking to y'all this morning on a Freestyle Friday. Y'all have a blessed weekend and stay involved in your kids' life. One love.